y'all. This is Okinson coming back with another episode, but it's the 150th episode. So what better way to celebrate this very special anniversary than talking about America's favorite subject, crime. And to celebrate this love for crime, I have some very special guests with me. Gwen Glue of the Astound Gwen Glue Department of Genetics and Developmental Medicine, Philip Mongan, a professor of social work with a PhD in the same field. Elizabeth Dowdo is a professor and coordinator of undergraduate research at Villanova University. And of course, your very own host, me, a professor of social psychology and vice dean of research at Tampere University, Finland.
What's more American than school shootings? In my paper, Etiology of School Shootings, I wrote that research showed in 2007, 18% of high school students had carried a weapon, 5% carried a gun, and 6% had carried a weapon while at school. And that was just in the 30 days before the survey.
This debate comes from the rise in high school shootings in America and the need to lower them. To truly address the issue, we have to understand the issue at hand. There have been a reported 1,676 casualties in school shootings in America since 2000.
Yes, and this is a very important issue because clearly there is not enough done to prevent or stop bullying, and it has the ability to brew into something drastic such as violence. The studies in bullying and school safety show that bullying is detrimental to the mental state of the victim. Not only does it affect their self-image, as victims are more likely to say they don't belong and that they see themselves as no good, but it visibly affects their performance in school and increases the feeling of needing defense.
Today we'll be discussing our argument, how bullying contributes to the increase in student-initiated school shooting rates in America to a great degree. To prove this, we'll examine the psychological distress and violent tendencies bullying causes, how emasculation contributes to feelings of defensiveness, and refute the idea that isolation is beneficial for one's health.
To start off, we will talk about bullying in the form of emasculation. And for those of you who don't know, emasculation is where someone makes another person feel less manly. In the case of the Columbine shooting, the offenders Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold were bullied and isolated before the shooting. In fact, one of their classmates admitted that they had been bullying them, along with many others. In my paper, I refer to a quote by that student where they say, "Sure, we teased them, but what do you expect with kids who come to school with weird hairdos and horns on their hats?" and proceeded to recall calling Harris and Klebold homos in order to get rid of them. I also found that more than 70% of school shootings happened in places that were more conservative and had a more masculine viewpoint.
Yeah, I agree with your statement. Bullying can really affect a person's mental, especially when it comes to males and degrading their masculinity. But social media also plays a big part with school shooters. In my paper, I wrote 88% of school shooters have at least one social media account, and 76% post disturbing content of guns. Over 72% of shooters had one reported adverse childhood experience, and 6% reported being bullied in person or online.
And social media also contributes to masculinity and the desire to control the way we are perceived. And social media trends don't help. The concept of toxic masculinity is a trend that popularizes certain characteristics as being harmful to relationships. But even the very basic things like not looking a certain way or acting too feminine only give more basis for mockery to those who don't fit the set profile. My friend Megan Boersma wrote about the effects of media in general on perceptions of crime in her article, The Whole Truth, which isn't completely relevant in this case because it focuses on perceptions of crime and not character. However, it still discusses the effect of media on actions and the way people view things when they don't know the whole truth.
Y'all, that was very insightful, and thanks for sharing your research with us. I know I invited you on my podcast for a reason, but now let's address some objections to our argument, see if we can culture these people. In my paper, I found that peer relationships are of utmost importance, and negative events related to peer relationships could be traumatic enough to result in the development of disorders. Relationships between family, peers, and adults are of utmost importance to those in the high school age of adolescence. This is an extreme contrast to the growing idea among the newer generation, especially with the rise of media. The latest media trends support the idea that isolation is a good thing and relationships should remain at a surface level. However, research constantly proves that theory wrong time and time again.
I fully agree that peer relationships are crucial too. In my paper, I discussed a model of steps that shooters take, including pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, maintenance, and termination. In all the steps, the impact of outside influence from peers can either harm or support a student's plan to carry out a school shooting. And that doesn't even consider the impact of peers on the initial desire to plan a school shooting. That is, the impact of bullying on students.
Wait, so just so we're clear, your research shows that outside peer influence heavily affects the potential shooter's decision making? So isolation really isn't good for one's health then?
Well, I mean, if the people you're around are school shooters, then isolation may be a good idea. But generally, no, isolation isn't good. Outside influence can definitely alter a shooter's plan, even to the degree that they decide not to carry out a shooting after all. But peer influence can be the factor that makes a student want to carry out a school shooting in the first place. Good influence can be the difference, but the same is true for bad influence.
There is also an association between bullying, psychological distress, and thoughts of violence. People who even think about harming others have been evoked by emotional suffering or possibly even from experiencing physical harm themselves. 26% of students surveyed were involved in bullying, either as a victim, bully, or both. All three groups were significantly more likely than bystanders to feel unsafe at school and sad most days. Having such a lack of self-drive or understanding of your capabilities can really take a toll on not only the psychological state of an adolescent, but is also detrimental to their performance in their school environment. The odds of being a victim of bullying were 10% lower for every 1 point increase in grade point average, meaning that bully victims usually have lower grades. A subgroup of victimized students expressed they are afraid to go to school. About 50% of students use strategies to avoid harm in school, which may reveal the reason bullied students are most likely to say that it is not wrong to take a gun to school, which shows that they understand the wish to harm others or the need to defend themselves through use of weapons.
In the book Gang Leader for a Day, I think there's examples of feelings of retaliation between the gang and the other tenants. The King gangs ran the projects and often used coercion, deprivation, and violence to convince the tenants to do as they say in face of potential rebellion. Sounds a lot like bullying, if you ask me. This led to the squatters, prostitutes, and normal tenants to want to do something. They report feelings of violence, retaliation, and desperation to Venkatesh. However, like most times with bullying, nothing is done and the cycle continues for the tenants.
Yeah, Oakenson could potentially be a comparison. And while I get where you're coming from with using the cycle of bullying and desperation for nothing to be done, it's not the same situation. We're talking about bullying in high school students that lead to mass school shootings. In the book Bullying of Grown Adults by an Organized Crime Group, where the dynamic is already established and accepted. It was a great try, buddy, but maybe just stick to hosting. Anyways, our viewers may be a little confused with all that information.
Bullying plays a huge role in student-intended school shootings as well as cyberbullying. Students are bullied and made to feel less than or if they don't fit the model. This causes extreme negative self-esteem, lower drive, violent tendencies, and psychological distress. These negative feelings lead to the students isolating themselves, which Oakenson proved is not a very good idea. Without influential people in their life to hinder them, the student can turn to violent ways of retaliation and revenge, which is why the rate of school shootings is going up in America. With a common foundation in most of them, the perpetrator has been a victim of bullying.